and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. The centre today launched Foreign Trade Policy 2023, which seeks to boost the country's exports to $2 trillion by 2030 by shifting from incentives to remission and entitlement-based regime. Now, FTP 2023, which comes into effect tomorrow, which is 1st of April, also seeks the internationalization of rupee and will facilitate global trade payment in domestic currency. India is likely to end this fiscal year with total exports of 760 to 770 US dollars billion as against 676 billion dollars in 21-22. Now, this was achieved despite various global headwinds that have disrupted supply chains, slowed export demand and put pressure on trade shipments. Now, the goal, of course, the larger goal here is to reach $2 trillion in exports by 2030. Joining me at this point in time is Ashwini Mahajan, who's an economist. Also with me is my colleague Karthik. I want to come to you first, Karthik. India exports are expected to reach $2 trillion by 2030. That's the expectation, however. How ambitious is it?
Doesn't seem very ambitious. Remember, we are already sitting in 2023, and 2023 was supposed to be the year by when our economy should have touched the $5 trillion mark. So the groundwork for this was already in place, and then of course we had COVID, though we saw a K-shaped recovery after that. But the fact of the matter being, we haven't reached 5 trillion today. But 7 years to go, 7 trillion being the overall economy size that we are targeting, and the fact that we want to be the third largest economy by the end of the decade. So exports will have to make up a vital component of that growth story. So some estimates suggest that 6.3% average growth rate, if you're able to achieve that over the next 7 years, we should be in a position to almost double our GDP from 3.5 today to about $7 trillion. And in those $7 trillion, of course, the export minus import is the critical part here. So our net exports should definitely be in the vicinity of 2 trillion. I think the larger question here comes from the fact that our exports worth 2 trillion going to be sufficient? We are already at about $700 million worth of exports, $700 odd million. So, to really take it up about 3 times or so in the next 7 years doesn't seem like a very ambitious project to me.
Okay. Ashwini is here. Ashwini, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. I also agree with the our friend. This is not a very ambitious project, especially in view of the fact that in the past few years, the country has made good strides in various fields, especially the defense sector. From nearly 70% of our requirements coming from imports, now we are reversing that, and we are not only we have not only reduced the import dependence regarding defense equipments, we have rather started increasing exports. And if we look at the different segments of defense sector, again we are doing so well, whether it is the guns or missiles and other things. This is one sector where we are finding good prospects in exports. And then ISRO has made a good plan of exporting many of the services and products to the rest of the world. And then the future of India's exports are getting brightened by making rupee an international currency, and especially those countries, those who are facing the paucity of dollars, they will also be coming forward by trading in rupee. So given all these factors, it seems that this is a target which is well achievable.
Okay. Looks like it's a target well achievable. That's the message coming in from Ashwini. Karan is also joining us very, very shortly. But before he comes in, I want to come to you, Karthik. We were talking about the rupee being depreciating as opposed to dollar, which is appreciating.
That's right.
So at a normalized level, how much value are we adding when we say 2 trillion in exports by 2030?
Very good question, Shweta. And I think Karan and of course Ashwini both will be able to answer that. But the perspective that we're trying to put out here is that we've seen the rupee depreciate about 4 to 6% year on year every year. Now, a $2 trillion is a big amount if we were to consider the export volume when we are sitting in 2023 today. Now, what is going to be the future value of this 2 trillion, or rather the 2 trillion in 2030, which is 7 years from now? The present value of that is likely to be much lesser than 2 trillion. So the point being, we are looking at a absolute number of 2 trillion, and we are comparing that figure of 7 years later to a figure of $700 billion today. While we are looking at 3 times the value export in 7 years, it's not going to be 3 times the volume export. So the volume export is something which is actually going to be a key driver when it comes to exports. So future value 2 trillion sounds very exciting. Present worth of that 2 trillion with the rupee depreciating on an average 4 to 6% year on year past 10 years, 12 years, it doesn't seem like a very sizable number.
Okay.
Now, the challenge that we are faced with presently is the fact that we are still, whatever said and done, an import-based economy. We are dependent on oil, which increases our import bill very significantly. At the same time, our export market so far in 2023 has been restricted to the IT services mostly. Now, I was reading a survey issued by CRISIL today before coming into the studio. Now, this year, for example, we are looking at a reduced growth rate in the ITES sector, primarily because of what has happened in the West and the BFSI sector in the West being a good clientele for Indian IT companies. So this year, as opposed to last year when the IT sector grew at about 20%, this year we are looking at the IT sector to grow only between 10 to 12%. So a good 8% reduction in the growth levels of the IT sector for FY24 will play a damper. Now, will the US economy go into recession? Is there going to be a larger slowdown in the world? And that pivot that India will have to make from a service-based export economy to a goods and manufactured product export economy is something which is going to be critical. But to offset the dollar-rupee sort of disparity that we see and the rupee depreciating, I think there is great merit in the FTP now formally making this vision statement of internationalization of the rupee. We've seen these discussions go on even earlier. Now, what does this typically mean? This means that there are going to be Vostro accounts that get opened in India. Vostro accounts are basically accounts held by Indian banks, within Indian banks, by global banks who bank with MNCs who are going to do business in India. Which means this money which gets otherwise offshore, travels outside the country, is actually going to stay within the country. And with these Vostro accounts, the same MNC can invest or do transactions with other industries, other sectors, other companies within the shores of India. And that is hopefully something which over time should strengthen the value of the rupee. But the problem in that, as I see, Ashwini might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, the problem I see with that is that right now our rupee is still pegged to the dollar. And this internationalization of the INR is largely going to be with respect to other countries that face a currency volatility, not as much the dollar. So our export figure of 2 trillion is still linked to the USD, while internationalization of the rupee may happen over time with other currencies and not specifically the dollar.
Okay. Karan is also here with us. Karan, call for trade settlement in rupee. How much is rupee accepted at this point in time? What steps have been taken to settle international trade in rupee? And what can we do from here on to ensure that rupee is more internationalized as opposed to what it is right now?
And protects its value. I think that is most critical.
Okay.
With its value intact.
Okay. Thanks for having me, first of all. So this is a geopolitical issue, I think, and not that simple to decipher at this point in time. The Indian rupee's share in global reserve assets that are held by global central banks is less than 0.25% as we speak. So compare that to the USD, which has a share of over 57% in the global reserve currency assets held by central banks. So despite the hoopla around the rupee trade, I don't really think that there is enough rupee in the global monetary system to warrant a convenient rupee trade. India needs to have an economy of at least $10 trillion to supply enough rupee to the global system. As of now, the rupee settlements, as I see it, are nothing more than tokenism or friendly gestures. So there's clearly a long way to go for India.
So, Karan, before you joined us, we were discussing actually the value of this $2 trillion worth of exports which have come in the foreign trade policy announced today earlier.
Right.
So, the fact of the matter being that we are looking at a figure of $2 trillion in the year 2030. We are sitting in 2023 and we are looking at a present day trade value of under $700 billion. So, is there some way to calculate, given the fact that the rupee has been depreciating at a rate of 4 to 6% over the last many years, year on year? So, is there some way that we could speculate or rather guesstimate a present value of that $2 trillion worth?
So, as I see it, Karthik, I think it's a very achievable target as far as the $2 trillion figure is concerned. With efficiencies achieved thanks to projects under the PM Gati Shakti and schemes such as the PLI and Make in India, we are all set to achieve that target. To my mind, India is close to merchandise exports worth $450 billion in the current fiscal year. And combine that to the GDP that we will close with around $3.8 trillion. So what that means is that India's merchandise exports to GDP ratio will be roughly 12%. Now compare that to China, which has a ratio at around 13.2%. So in terms of the size of our GDP and comparing a performance with our peers, we are actually in a pretty good space. Now, if we consider the merchandise plus service exports combined at around $750 billion for the year, then the total export to GDP ratio comes to around 20%. Now that, I think, is the highest we have seen in recent history. Therefore, with greater efficiencies achieved, I can safely presume that a $2 trillion exports or 24% of GDP is not a far-fetched idea at all and definitely achievable. But just to bring in international perspectives here, the size of the Dutch economy is roughly $1 trillion at this time. Yet the merchandise exports of that country are valued around $690 billion. So what that means is that the share of the Dutch merchandise exports to the GDP is roughly 69%. In the same way, the share of exports in Germany and Japan is roughly around 41 to 42%. So the key here is to move up the value chain, move up. So we have to move away from basic exports and move towards high-end manufacturing.
So help me understand here, Karan and Ashwini, I'll come to you as well, that why we are talking about a value of $2 trillion worth of exports. In terms of the volume of that export quantum, 2030 is still 7 years away. Is there some way that we can look at the present value worth of, in terms of volume, if you were to sort of, compare a value worth of $2 trillion of 2030 today, given the fact that the rupee has been depreciating, and if internationalization happens and maybe with respect to other weaker currencies, despite that, what is the volume worth of the value of 2 trillion in 2030 in 2023?
So the question is for me, Karan?
Yeah,
Yes.
Karan, we'll start with you.
Okay, so it is very difficult to understand how much share a depreciated rupee has on inflation and the nominal GDP. This is simply because nominal GDP is not only a function of imported inflation, but also domestic supply chain efficiencies and the prevailing wage rates, for example. Therefore, the best way to understand the value added is through the lens of the export to GDP ratio, as I was mentioning earlier. So from that perspective, as I mentioned, our merchandise exports to GDP ratio is at 12%, and that is constant. So what this means is that despite our growth in exports, our exports are growing as a constant proportion to our GDP at around 12%. So if I assume that our economy is worth around $8.5 trillion in 2030, then in order to add more value and to have our exports at 2 trillion, we need to increase our export share in the GDP to around 24%. Now, for that to happen, we need to move up the value chain considerably. So to answer your question, Karthik, there is really no way to understand how much a depreciated rupee would sort of impact the share of exports to our GDP. But
Right.
I can say that the best way to decipher that is to understand how much value it is adding as a proportion to the GDP. And with that perspective, I think we are pretty much on the way to achieve that target.
Right. And we are talking about an absolute export figure. We are not really looking at net exports. So while we are keen and ambitious to achieve that $2 trillion of exports, I think what is going to be critical is going to be the net exports, which means even reducing the import bill. How do we go about doing that as well in the next 7 years?
So if we have a $2 trillion worth of export, then it is quite possible that our imports will be roughly 2.5, $2.6 trillion.
So there's
So
still a
there's really
deficit
no
there.
way. Absolutely, absolutely. I think a country like India, which is domestic demand-driven economy, it is very difficult for us to be a surplus economy in the near future because the domestic market is so large, and given the fact that almost 80% of Indian households by that time would be in the middle income category, consumption capacity of an Indian household will be multifold. So I'm not really sure whether we can achieve a surplus in our trade anytime soon, even though our economy will be the third largest in the world.
Okay.
So that means we are still looking at a current account deficit even in 2030. So what does that mean for the value of the Indian rupee in 2030?
So by 2030, Karthik, I think I was overhearing your conversation with the other panelists here. So the rupee, by that time, Indian economy will be, as I was mentioning earlier, almost $10 trillion. Now, when that would happen, India would be able to supply enough rupee in the global system. So if you compare that with the USD, then even the US is a deficit economy. It imports more than it exports, despite the fact that it has one of the most highly value-added economies in the world. So, and that is because of a concept in economics that we call the Triffin paradox, which means that you must have enough currency in the global system for it to become globally acceptable as a tender of exchange. So the USD is in enough supply in the global system because the US imports more than it exports. If you compare that with China, then China does not have enough yuan or renminbi in the system because it exports more than it imports. So in order to have the rupee as an acceptable tender in the global system, India must remain a deficit economy, and that would benefit the Indian economy and will not be some kind of an impediment to its economic prospects.
Okay. Karan, stay with us. Ashwini is also back. Ashwini, another, moving on from this to another important aspect of FTP, which is that it identifies about 4 towns of export excellence: Faridabad, Moradabad, Mirzapur, Varanasi, in addition to the already existing 39, such towns. What does this really mean for Moradabad, Mirzapur, Varanasi when it comes to, their town, when it comes to what they make indigenously and how much they export?
In fact, earlier on in the earlier Exim policies, we used to talk about the macro figures, and these macro figures sometimes do not take account of the possibilities and the prospects which our country has in the micro sense, or to say the different districts of the country. In the past about 5-6 years, what we see is that there is a focus on the district development, aspirational districts we are talking about. Now earlier on we were talking about
aspirational states, and now we're talking about aspirational districts, and we will come down to the aspirational blocks. If we have a look at our different districts, if we see Tirupur, we are making a huge amount of exports from there, and many other districts in Tamil Nadu and in other southern states. But the mm, other states like Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh and all these uh, earlier, which were the underdeveloped states, now the uh, the new products are being identified there, where we can really make a good stride in exports. And so if this at district level efforts are being made, uh, the figures we can add on to. As I was mentioning earlier, that this figure of $2 trillion may look to be big, but if we look at the components of this increase in exports, the growth in exports, then we see we can make a good stride. And I don't agree with this that we will be lagging behind in service exports. We can do well in service as well as in manufacturing, and I do find a great scope even in the agricultural exports. So this I never believe in this theory that we have to be just good in export of services or just good in the export of goods, in manufactured goods. We can do well in all sectors of the economy. And so this figure, if we take the aggregate of the manufacturing value addition, the services and agriculture, and within manufacturing, if we see the defense is one of the big sectors, then space is another sector, AI is another sector. So and the way in which we have progressed in the past few years, especially after the corona, uh, we have seen that dependence on the rest of the world is not so conducive to the development, and therefore
Right.
having an atmanirbharta, a self-reliance in different fields. For example, we see the mm, semiconductors. We never thought of producing semiconductors. Look at the solar equipments. We never thought of making solar cells ourselves, but now uh, the roadmap is very clear. We are producing, and the very first installment of production in semiconductors will come in this year. And similarly, solar panels. In the past, whenever we thought of solar panels, we thought of only China. We can import from China, but now everybody is talking about Indian solar panels,
Right.
made by Vikram or Adani or others. So defense is another field. AI is just yet another. And district level, as you have mentioned, there are 739 districts in the country, and every district is important in its own way. So if we take this further, one district, one product, and we focus on the export of that product. So this $2 trillion uh, export target looks to be, I feel, underestimation.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Not an overambitious target, but in fact, an underestimation of what India can achieve if it starts working strongly on the path of Atmanirbharta, which, by the way, it already is doing. Karan, Ashwini, thanks very much for joining us with your inputs on that very important story. We're going to shift focus. Starting tomorrow, several important regulations will kick in from 1st of April, the start of the new financial year. The new rules will define how we earn, spend or save money. Many changes in the income tax rules are effective from 1st of April. Changes in income tax slabs to tax rebate limits. LTCG tax benefits on debt mutual funds are some of the major changes that will be effective. We are hoping to discuss all those changes and more. With me is my colleague Karthik. Karthik, to begin with, the new income tax regime will kick into place from tomorrow onward. What does it mean for taxpayers?
Well, nothing really immediately. It kicks into place from tomorrow, 1st of April 2023. but you'll actually have to take a decision on whether to go for the new, which is the default tax regime, or the old tax regime only in the assessment year, which is going to be around 31st July 2024, unless the deadline gets pushed and extended as it usually does. So, so I think critical changes announced this year in the budget in the new tax regime. Remember, the old tax regime was not even touched. It wasn't even mentioned in the budget speech, except for the fact that while the new tax regime becomes default, the old tax regime is something that you could still opt for, and you could have all your basic exemptions and standard deductions built into it. So, I mean, we can quickly run through the rates that the finance minister had announced in the budget, and thankfully, no finance amendment bill has changed those, while there have been other changes that we can come to. So, no tax for 0 to 3 lakh rupees. It was, the basic exemption was 2.5 lakh rupees earlier. That has been increased to 3 lakhs. 3 to 6 lakhs, 5%, and so on, a 5% increase for every 3 lakhs of salary. So 0 to 3, 0%, 3 to 6, 5%, 6 to 9, 10%, 9 to 12, 15%, 12 to 15, 20%, and 15 upwards is a 30% tax. Now, what has also happened in the new tax regime is that the surcharge, maximum surcharge, has reduced from 37% to 25%. Of course, that is something that impacts and makes a positive dent on the ultra rich. And apart from that, of course, like I said, you have the option of choosing between the two tax regimes. Now, there's a very interesting calculation that I was making before I came into the studio. Up to 7 lakhs, there is no tax, right? So your basic exemption, which was 5 lakhs earlier, has now been increased to 7 lakh rupees. Now, the point is, up to 7 lakh rupees, you don't pay any income tax whatsoever. But if your salary goes up by 100 rupees in a year, if your salary becomes 7 lakh and 100 rupees,
okay,
you don't pay a 5% tax on that 100 rupees. In fact, you come into the bracket of the 7 lakhs upwards, which means all the slabs kick in. So for somebody who's earning 7 lakh rupees, there is no tax. For somebody who's earning 100 rupees more in a year, the tax liability actually goes up to about 25,000 rupees. How? Because then 0 to 3, you don't pay any tax. 3 to 6, 5% tax, which is 15,000 rupees. And the balance of, let's say, 3 lakhs to 6 lakhs, you pay the 10% and so on. So when you calculate, it's a dent of about 25,000 rupees of tax for a 100 rupee increase in your annual salary.
That's very interesting. So anything over 7 lakh is going to have a dent on your income.
And all the tax
and all the tax slabs will kick in.
That's right.
Also, tax rebate limit raised to 7 lakhs essentially means that if you're earning less than 7 lakh, you need not invest anything to claim an exemption.
Correct. Absolutely. So no tax whatsoever. If your total income is under 7 lakh rupees, nothing to be done. It's a zero tax return.
Okay. I want to talk about this very interesting LTCG removal on debt mutual funds that was announced very, very recently. Will also kick in from 1st of April onward. What does it mean for investors?
Okay, so we had a very long debate on that, and I think I'll request our viewers to sort of, go back to about 5-6 days ago and look at our video. So we had an excellent panel of Lakshmi Iyer, Gurmeet Chadha, and many other experts joining us. But broadly, what the Finance Amendment Bill has done this time around is that debt mutual funds have lost their sheen completely, which means they no longer provide that indexation benefit, which was a great tax benefit for people who were investing in the long term, and long term was defined as 3 years and upwards in the case of debt mutual funds. So in a debt mutual fund, you would stay invested for 3 years. Your tax outgo would be calculated as LTCG of 20% on a debt instrument. And on top of that, you got the indexation advantage, and that indexation was primarily the dividend that has accrued on your investment minus the inflation. So a 1 lakh rupee invested giving let's say a dividend of about 8 to 9% over 3 years versus inflation at about 5% per annum, which means you paid tax only on the dividend minus inflation. Now that has gone completely, and the 20% tax LTCG tax has also been reduced, which means it will be equated with equity mutual funds, which are taxed at 10% LTCG. So overall, it is a debt mutual fund is more comparable with a bank-linked fixed deposit now when it comes to taxation. And if you were to compare the LTCG benefit, then that of equity mutual funds at 10%, which is any holding more than 1 year. That sort of applies for debt mutual funds.
Okay, and that also kicks in starting tomorrow.
That's right.
Another interesting thing, and we've discussed this before, for high net worth individuals who were queuing outside, big luxury apartments. For them, the capital gain exemption by reinvesting in luxury apartment, and the deduction is currently now tabbed at 10 crores starting tomorrow. So that means that people who want to buy luxury apartment, today is the last day if they want to avail some sort of benefit.
Absolutely. So very few hours left for the property office to be open. So I think anybody who would have wanted to reinvest that capital appreciation hopefully should have done it already. But otherwise, these are ultra rich people. It doesn't matter if they pay a few lakhs extra in taxes.
Okay. So some very, very interesting taxation laws that will kick in from tomorrow, which is the start of the financial year, and you can look them up. You can also go visit our discussions that we've done earlier today and in the subsequent last couple of 3 or 4 weeks to understand where and how you can save money in the months to come.
And the standard disclaimer, Shweta.
Yes.
Consult your CA, consult a registered financial advisor before taking any of our suggestions too seriously.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Karthik. And shifting focus, sticking to his promise of making Twitter algorithm open source, Elon Musk tweeted on Friday that algorithm goes open source at noon Pacific time, which is around midnight in India Standard Time. Musk in February had already hinted at making Twitter code open source. On March 18th, Elon tweeted that Twitter will open source all codes used to recommend tweets on 31st of March. He has also provided, code transparency now, and he says that this will lead to rapid improvement in recommendation quality. We'll of course have to wait and watch out for what it does. And open source software or algorithm means that it will be publicly accessible. Anyone will be able to see, modify and distribute Twitter's algorithm that it uses to recommend tweets to its users. On the verification front, and we're going to come to verification in just a bit, but let me first begin by asking you, Karthik. Also joining us in the studio is Hemant Sajnani, who is the CTO of TV9 Digital. But Karthik, to you, Elon promised it, he has done it, he's saying it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, so I think what is interesting to note is that Elon Musk pretty much does what he says. Unlike many other leaders, he's somebody who sticks his neck out. He says the most if I can say, maverickish statements are made publicly. And he's not somebody who goes back on his word. So 18th March, he said he's going to do it. 31st March, here we are. He tweeted a couple of hours ago that the recommendation source code is actually going to be open. Now, I really don't know what an open source recommendation engine is.
We have Hemant for that. Hemant, what does it mean for Twitter users, for Twitter at large?
Sure. So let me first begin with what exactly is the open source technology. So open source technology basically is giving the source code to the public so that developer community, the researchers, they come into the picture, they can change the code, they can use it for their purpose, and they can distribute it as well back to the community. So that is what the open source is, and there are many examples which are already available in the market, which are like the Linux operating system. You must have heard about it. We are using it since years now. The WordPress is a very powerful open source system. We are using it as a CMS. For many organizations are still using it. We have several other examples, like the Meta has developed one programming language which is called React. So that is being used for front end and the app development as well. So now coming back to the Twitter, like the Elon Musk, that he has disclosed that the open source of the recommendation engine that is being used by one of the most powerful platforms in the social community, Twitter, is going to be available for all the users. So that brings in a plethora of opportunity in my sense, that people, the techies, can use that source code, they can use it for their own recommendation systems, they can enhance it, and they can give back to the Twitter community as well. So as mentioned in the Elon Musk tweet as well, that he himself thinks that the algorithm that is being used for Twitter recommending the tweets is very complicated. So I believe that in certain way he is inviting other developer community to participate, to involve themselves in understanding that algorithm and make it a little simpler and more useful for the Twitter people as well. Because ultimately every platform that is having the recommendation system, they need more user engagement on their platform. So that is my 2 bits on it.
Okay. And how significant a move this is to go open source at this point in time? Because, just to apprise our viewers of what has happened in the last couple of days is Twitter's source code was also put out on GitHub.
Exactly.
There was a legal battle that ensued.
Yes.
What is the significance of going open source now?
So as Musk declared earlier that that he's planning to give the source code to the community in order to get more and more development ideas around that source code. LinkedIn is using the recommendation engine. The Facebook is using the recommendation engine. What Twitter is using right now is now in the public. So I think that the idea behind opening the source code to the public is getting more developers into it, giving their they can come into the picture, they can recommend that how exactly it can be more robust and it can be more engaging for the Twitter users. That is what I think.
Okay. There's more news coming in from Twitter. On the verification front, the new rules on blue tick will also kick in from tomorrow, 1st of April. Users will now have to sign up for Twitter Blue by paying 650 rupees a month or 6,800 rupees annually, while organizations will get a gold check mark next to their profile. In case of business, a non-profit, they will receive a square avatar, while governmental and multilateral organizations will get a grey check mark or a circular avatar. The verified organization subscription in India will come at a price of 82,300 rupees a month. Our organization will also have to pay for that. Organizations buying this plan will have to pay an additional of 4,120 rupees a month for every affiliate seat or the account they choose to give the badge to. I want to understand how helpful is this? Because, there's a huge debate on Twitter about Twitter's responsibility to ensure that I do not have a person impersonating me. From tomorrow onward, anybody can go by the name of Shweta Kothari and open an account, and as long as they're ready to pay for it, Hemant.
Yeah. So it is I think Elon Musk is just trying to get more and more revenue out of those blue ticks and the badges that he is introducing. So maybe he just want to commercialize it in a better way, and maybe people have to pay from their pocket if they want to retain those ticks and the badges.
So I think if you were to look at the P&L of Twitter, it's panning out very interestingly right now. So you've cut down on half your workforce. And now, from what I understand, what Hemant just told us with this open source recommendation engine, you're actually getting collaborators coming from across the world and really doing the code for you. So you don't need the techies, all those many techies as you fired already, to be on your boards. And on the other hand, you're looking at raking up revenue, and poor genuine blue tick users like you, Shweta, are at the receiving end of this, while the likes of Hemant and me with not too many followers can go ahead and still buy one and seem authentic.
True.
Okay, so starting tomorrow, every person who's got a legacy blue tick, it will go away. You will have to start paying up. Those who are not going to pay up will not get their blue tick. It will not be retained anymore. Very interesting developments, Karthik, there from Twitter. I want to come back to just on the point of debate around this entire money minting machine around verification. A lot of people have a problem with it, and it's been a continuous debate even on Twitter for that matter. Right. And Elon Musk has been actively responding to every person who's come up to him with a question. The idea that it's your job to ensure that my account is safe, that my identity is not copied by different people, it's not impersonated, and more importantly, the two-factor authentication. Right. It's your responsibility to ensure that I don't get hacked.
KYC,
all of that goes
we've
away.
seen it for so many years, Shweta. This is KYC, know your customer. It's as simple as that. Banks don't take responsibility to verify you or me, right? It is our documentation that helps them verify us, that we are actually who we claim to be. Okay. So I think Twitter is pretty much playing the KYC card. At one end, it becomes a great revenue model. And on the other side, with this crowdsourcing of coders, I think it becomes a great cost proposition as well.
Lovely cost proposition. This all comes at the time where Twitter's revenues are dwindling. There are talks of Twitter's overall market share also going down. We'll of course have to wait and watch out for how the new blue tick verification will play out in the market. We'll keep a track on that story. Karthik, Hemant, thanks very much for joining us.
And Shweta, if I can just plug in an excellent story that we have on News 9 Plus on the whole saga of Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter. I think all our viewers must definitely take time, download the News 9 Plus app and watch our special 2-episode series called The Musketeer to try and get inside the mind of Elon Musk.
That's going to be a hard task, but we've done it for you. Go and download News 9 and watch that very interesting documentary. Shifting focus now, the Indian Premier League, one of the most popular sporting tournaments in the world, is getting underway today, but those looking forward to watch it on their telly may have to shell more due to a standoff between RIL-owned cable firms and TV right holders Disney Star. Around 20 million television viewers who are subscribers of a major multi-system cable operators like Den Network, Hathway Cable and Datacom and GTPL Hathway will see Star Sports and other channels of Star removed from their basic plans effective tomorrow, 1st of April, which means that they will have to pay on a particular fee, and in order to view these channels, they will have to go online. My colleague Shweta Kothari, who tracks media and broadcasting space, is here to explain what consumers are up against. Shweta, what does it really mean for subscribers?
Thank you, Shweta, for having me on the show. Yeah, as once again the season of cricket is here. IPL, one of the world's most hot sporting properties, is set to get underway today, and India is a cricket crazing country. But unfortunately, those who want to watch it on the telly on HD, they may have to shell out more if they are subscribers of three MSOs, Den, Hathway and GTPL Hathway. That's because most of these firms which are owned by RIL, which is a competitor of Star and which has the digital rights of IPL, they are vying for eyeballs, competing with the Star, which has the television rights. So in that case, like always, we see that consumer is the king, but in India that's not the case, because every major sporting property, when it is about to happen, we've all seen this standoffs between the multi-system operators and the channels, and like always the consumer has to pay through their noses, because in a battle of attrition, I think somewhere someone has to lose, and unfortunately in India that is the consumer.
It's the consumers
Yeah,
who are
absolutely
losing. Absolutely. Lloyd Matthias, who's also a strategist, joining us at this point in time. Lloyd, why do linear television subscribers have to be on the receiving end of disruption? And they have been in the past few years, and generally speaking, and specifically when it comes to big ticket sporting events when they're just around the corner.
I think a slightly qualified response to that, Shweta. I think clearly, as Shamalia pointed out, the linear TV subscribers that are part of these three cable networks will obviously have a bit of a problem. But I think to kind of contextualize the genesis of the problem, I think for the first time in the IPL's 15-year history, have the digital and the broadcasting rights got split. Traditionally, it's always one media network that's bought both. And obviously, their focus has been selling the television rights, and digital was a kind of afterthought. I think this year, BCCI justifiably split the rights down the middle. And clearly, Disney acquired the broadcasting rights for Star Sports. And what happened was Network 18 acquired the OTT, or the digital rights. Now, obviously, Network 18 and through Jio Cinema, what they're doing is they're trying to obviously popularize the OTT channel Jio Cinema, and therefore they've made it completely free. And they're doing a whole skew of, you may have seen the commercials with Dhoni, with Sachin, talking about customization. I think what they're doing is slightly unfair, but using the Reliance-owned channels, the digital, the cable channels, these three networks, and therefore charging for Star. Ideally, the consumers would have got a great deal all across, but now obviously consumers or viewers of these three cable networks have a bit of a problem. So you're right, linear TV subscribers are going to have a problem. But in general, I think it's a positive development, because suddenly digital is going to be that much more mass. Suddenly you're going to see a spate of OTT growth, because Jio Cinema is eventually an OTT channel. And you're really looking at about 150 to 200 million people actually watching the IPL out of Jio Cinema, with all the features that go with it, right? So the customization, the repeats, the slow motions, 18 language offers. So I think it's an interesting proposition. In the long run, the viewer and the consumer will only benefit, barring for this initial hiccup.
So if I may ask, obviously Jio is betting big on digital because they've got the rights. Even Star would have loved to have those rights with Hotstar, because they were the ones who pushed it initially when they had got the rights the first time around. But internet connections in many parts of the country are still patchy, and in India, cricket viewing is kind of family event, especially during weekends. Don't you think that way, where also a number of subscribers in small towns are still dependent on MSOs, don't you think it's a bit hard on them?
I think you're right, Somalia. It's partially hard. Jio tried it out, obviously, with the FIFA World Cup last November, December. And then we saw initially they had lots of teething problems. I think what they're doing is the two-pronged. I think at one level, you see Reliance wants to control the entire ecosystem, right? We're talking of 750 to 800 million internet users of which roughly about 450 million have broadband. Now Reliance is pushing hard on fiber. So I think what they're effectively doing is by making the OTT channel JioCinema free, by offering all these customized options, by offering 18 language commentary for the IPL, I think they're actually forcing OTT down the population strata. So you're effectively going to have a lot more viewers switch into OTT thanks to the IPL. Obviously, there'll be some issues, but this is their big push. Now, if you look at the economic Somalia, you understand that historically, 85% of the revenues of an IPL were realized through broadcast, through the television, television advertising. Only 15% came out of digital, right? So even within Star Television, Star Sports was big. Hotstar was a bit of an afterthought. I think right now with the bids of digital overtaking television, all of a sudden, I think one will see a lot more competition dynamics. It's effectively like what happened in the telecom sector in 2016 when Jio came and changed the rules of the game, right? Suddenly voice became free and such like. So I think this disruption just started. And in the next 6 months to a year, one will see a huge disruption. So a lot more Indians will get on to OTT and therefore the spread of broadband will increase. And I think in the long run, therefore, it's a positive development for all.
So where will you be watching? Will it be on the mobile connected or medium, or will it be on the HD screen on Star?
I think it's very tempting to say one would watch it on the HD screen because it's the large format and whatever. But nowadays, the fact that you're on the move, you're traveling. Presently, I'm traveling. It's so much more easier. And I think I'm quite excited about the whole customization. You can see snippets, you can see moments, you can replay it, you can watch slow-mos. I think those really make it beneficial. Secondly, and I think for Shweta's earlier point, I think for advertisers, the OTT offers a whole range of possibilities. Suddenly, I can customize by city, right? So if I want to target audiences in Jaipur, I can have a separate kind of communication reach out to only the OTT people watching IPL through JioCinema there. I think that brings a lot of small advertisers in. I don't need to be a national player. I could be a sari shop in Jaipur targeting only that segment. I think that's the real power that they are unleashing through this whole strategy.
Okay. Lloyd, just a last question before I let you go. With Viacom18 picking up digital rights of IPL at an astronomical price and, TV rights holder like Disney Star also going aggressively on live television as the preferred medium, how do you see the ecosystem evolving in years to come?
I think two people are laughing all the way to the bank. I think the first is franchise owners. Everyone tells you that, the original franchise owners, the Shah Rukh Khans of KKR, the Ambanis, of course, I think suddenly realized that they get 50% of all the media rights, right? And no one 15 years ago assumed the media rights would reach these astronomical levels. The two big networks have bid about 53,000 crores over 5 years, right? 25,000 by Star and about 26,000 by Network 18. So I think that's huge, and 50% goes, so that's one. Two is, I think, thanks to a disruption, this will increase the spread of OTT. JioCinema will suddenly kind of go national, which will be a very positive development. So I think that's the big part. And I think lastly, cricket and BCCI is the winner. Because effectively, IPL, which is already a huge brand, which has really changed the dynamics of cricket in India and indeed the cricketing world, will only become larger. So you're talking about IPL being among the top 3 sporting properties in the world. So I think in that sense, it's a positive development. It's the classic example of commerce coming together with sport to actually make this, this game go completely international.
Okay, game is going international. Lloyd Matthias, Shweta Kothari, thanks very much, gentlemen, for joining with your inputs on that story. Shifting focus, are you a Disney Hotstar subscriber? Furthermore, are you a fan of HBO content? If you have binged on The Last of Us, not to forget Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, and The Time Traveler's Wife, to name a few, it's time to re-look at your watch list. After today, HBO's original content will not be available on Disney Hotstar. The news had been confirmed by Disney via a tweet earlier this month. There seems to be some glimmer of hope for fans. The exclusive HBO content might be available on Amazon Prime in the form of another subscription. All of this has not been officially announced yet, but there is some sense that this will happen in months to come. Joining me in the newsroom is my colleague Amit Ranjan. Also joining me is Krishna Kumar. Krishna, coming to you first. Hotstar content, or Disney rather, content will no more have HBO content that we've been binged watching. For example, Game of Thrones. Where can the consumer and the audience go from here on?
Well, that's a multi-billion-dollar question, because at least a few $1 million, tens of $1 million. Let me break this down to the numbers. As far as the news is concerned, we don't know where the content is going to go. Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns HBO, is looking for a deal with any OTT platform in India to put that content available for the millions of fans in India. But in the meanwhile, what has happened is really simple. There was a 5-year-long deal that was till the 31st of March 2023, where the content stays on Disney Plus, on Disney's platform, and then Disney, with the new management, with the new CEO, Bob Iger, has decided to not continue that deal simply because it doesn't make sense at a unit economics level. In fact, because in terms of the number of consumers who consume HBO content on Disney Plus Hotstar, and the amount of revenue it's able to bring in, and the cost that it's charging for it, that's where the problem is. Because HBO wants to charge, Warner Bros. Discovery wants to charge for HBO content anywhere around $10 million per year, around 80 crore rupees per year. But then Disney Hotstar's highest top package plan is 1,499 rupees per year here in India, and that's not enough to cover for that. And that's the reason why, Shweta, we have a problem over here. For now, we'll have to see which OTT platform picks up, but the content for now is not available. Succession, fans of Succession can forget about it. It's not available anywhere, so they'll have to wait for it, Shweta.
Okay, you're a fan of Succession. I'm given to understand.
The best award-winning show available after Game of Thrones for the best drama series, at the Emmys, the Golden Globes, it's a fantastic series, Succession, and yes, a lot of fans, because Succession season 4 is out, but not out on Disney Hotstar as usual, because it's off the platform starting today. So, bad luck for those.
Okay, last day for those who are hooked on to any HBO show on Disney Hotstar, because it's not going to be up on the platform from tomorrow. Amit, there is a cost proposition here. As Krishna pointed out, it wasn't making any sense anymore to have HBO content on Disney Hotstar.
Yeah, that cost proposition and the unit economics Krishna alluded to is correct. What I also believe, and it's in the ambit of conjecture, is Disney is about brand. And with the clutter in social and OTT that is happening right now, it may be, and it just may be, that Disney wants to concentrate on its own content, and HBO probably may come into India with something else. They are already on Amazon Prime platform with certain shows on certain subscriptions. As we speak, Netflix too, and it's about brand again, they are going to cut down on the amount of movies they're going to make, and as they have quoted, they're going to make lesser but higher quality movies. So basically, it is again concentration on brand that is happening across the board with the clutter around. So this is something also that I believe, or I can guess that may be happening around here.
Right. Talking about brands, Amit, if I may comment on that, Shweta, the fact that Disney Hotstar had to let go IPL rights, brand IPL from its platform, has resulted in a 6% drop in its user base from around 61.3 million to about 57.5 million. So clearly, losing brand IPL has meant a 6% drop. But then Disney Hotstar is saying that the consumer base on its platform is moving from sports content to general entertainment content. So it's hoping that the loss of IPL will even out with more consumers taking on its general entertainment content. But then again, now that it's losing HBO, I'm not sure that will not have a negative impact on Disney Hotstar's consumer base in India, user base in India.
Yes, Amit. On the consumer base, is Disney Hotstar likely to lose out on consumers?
Yeah, and I just want to add to what Krishna said. The losing of IPL is pretty curious. They have lost the digital rights. They have the broadcast rights. And it's only understandable the person who was pitching for them is now pitching for somebody else. So that is all over the world. They are concentrating on the OTT and all that. In India, it is about broadcast. So that is basically something curious that is happening here. Time will tell how Disney plays this out.
Okay, we will have to wait and watch out to see whether Disney are going to lose out on their subscribers or not. For now, it wasn't making any sense economically, as Krishna and Amit pointed out. So no more HBO content on Disney starting tomorrow. Krishna, Amit, thanks very much for joining us, gentlemen, with your inputs on that story. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business Plus. Thanks for watching.